You should be harder than you are. After what happened, becoming colder would have made sense. Becoming suspicious would have made sense. Closing the door and telling yourself that nothing sacred was coming would have made sense, but you did not. Chosen one, that is the part of your story you keep underestimating. I do not mean that God learned something about you that he did not already know. When I say heaven paused, I am giving language to the weight of a choice most people never celebrate because nobody sees it happen. You refuse to let pain have final authorship over your identity. Think about what that cost. There was a moment when bitterness would have been easier. There was a moment when assuming the worst would have protected you from disappointment. There was a moment when numbness looked almost like wisdom. Maybe you came close. Maybe for a season you did close down. But something kept returning. You kept asking. You kept searching. You kept believing there might still be more to your life than what had already happened to you. That return matters more than you realize. Before this message ends, I want to show you 3 things. First, what was so rare about your response, and why it has nothing to do with being better than anyone else. Second, why deep intuition can remain while mental clarity seems to disappear. Third, how to tell whether you need another sign or a clearer receiver. Here is the first breakthrough. If you have ever known exactly what you needed to do at night, then awakened the next morning and somehow lost the conviction, you probably blamed your discipline. If you have ever felt clear during prayer or silence, then watched that clarity dissolve when normal life returned. You may have blamed your faith, but notice the pattern. The message did not always disappear. Your access to it changed. That distinction is small enough to miss and large enough to change what follows. Stop calling every loss of clarity a loss of calling. Those are not the same thing. I call the larger pattern the receiver gap. We are not opening it fully yet, because first, you need to understand what survived inside you and why it survived. But hold this question. What if the thing you keep asking God to restore was never completely gone? What if it was still there, beneath fatigue, disappointment, noise, and the habits you built to protect yourself? What if your task is not to become someone new, but to recover stable access to what pain failed to erase? If that names something you have lived, write 4 words below. I did not harden, not as a performance, as a marker. The rare thing was never that nothing touched you. The rare thing was that after being touched by all of it, something essential in you still came back alive. And what comes next is about that part. The part that survived quietly, the part nobody applauded, the part you may have mistaken for weakness. Because once you see what it really is, you will understand why the next season cannot be built by becoming colder. It has to be built by becoming clearer. There is a reason the rarest part of your story was almost invisible. The world knows how to measure what you gained. It can count money, titles, applause, relationships, and open doors. But it has no easy way to measure the person you refused to become when bitterness was available. Think about one of your hardest nights. The room was quiet. Your phone had stopped lighting up. There was nobody left to convince and nobody close enough to understand the full weight you carried. In that silence, a person meets the version of themselves that pain is trying to create. You may have met that version too. It wanted to distrust everyone. It wanted to punish new people for old wounds. It wanted to call hope foolish so disappointment could never surprise you again. But survival was not the final story. Something in you eventually said no. Not to boundaries, not to wisdom. You said no to letting the wound become your identity. You said no to making bitterness your permanent home. That is what I call the rare refusal. It is the moment pain loses the right to write your final character. It does not mean you never became angry. It means your pain did not receive unlimited authority over who you would become. This is why softness and weakness must never be confused. Weakness has no boundary. Sacred softness can say no. It can leave a harmful room, and it can do all of that without needing hatred to feel strong. Think about Joseph. Long before his circumstances changed, there was a deeper victory. Betrayal, false accusation, and confinement not get to decide the entire shape of his inner life. His environment became narrow, but his identity did not have to become narrow with it. That is the pattern I want you to recognize in yourself. Your victory may not yet look like the result you prayed for. It may look like loving without abandoning discernment. It may look like imagining a future after one future collapsed. The next stage requires openness and wisdom. If you become completely closed, nothing reaches you. If you become completely unguarded, everything reaches you. The goal is not to tear down every wall. The goal is to build a door you can choose to open. So ask yourself a different question tonight. Not, why did this happen to me? Ask, what did this fail to take from me? Maybe it failed to take your ability to begin again. Maybe it failed to take the quiet conviction that your life still carries meaning. If that is your truth, mark it with these words: pain did not name me. Let that sentence separate your history from your identity. Your history explains some reactions. It does not own your future. The first mystery is closing. What you did that was rare was not some secret achievement. You refused to let suffering complete its preferred version of you. You kept an inner door open to truth, possibility, and return. But that creates a harder question. If something so important survived, why do you still have mornings when your mind feels distant from it? Why can your heart remain open while your clarity disappears? Why can you know that you should move, yet feel unable to gather yourself long enough to move? That is where the story changes. Preserving the heart is not the same as having steady access to the mind that must carry its direction into action. The gap between those two experiences has been hiding in plain sight. You can keep your heart open and still feel mentally far away from yourself. That is the part many people misunderstand. They assume calling should always come with available clarity. But lived experience is rarely that simple. You may recognize this pattern. You know you are capable, but access feels inconsistent. An idea comes with force, then disappears beneath ordinary noise. A simple decision becomes exhausting. You remember a version of yourself who learned faster and imagined more freely. Then another pattern appears. You consume more information. You wait for certainty to become so strong that action feels effortless. But sometimes the information is not missing. Sometimes the mind trying to organize it is simply overloaded. This is what I mean by the receiver gap. It is the space between receiving an insight and having enough stable clarity to process that insight into a decision. Calling and processing capacity are not the same thing. Faith and uninterrupted concentration are not the same thing. Spiritual depth does not make a human mind immune to overload. That distinction can remove a great deal of shame. A foggy morning does not automatically mean you lost direction. A distracted week does not automatically mean God withdrew the assignment. Sometimes a temporary condition starts to feel like a permanent verdict. Think about the moments when clarity does come. Maybe it happens in the shower. Maybe it happens during a quiet drive. Maybe it arrives after everyone else is asleep. In those moments, one clear thought can remain visible. Then morning arrives, messages appear, responsibilities return, fear begins offering commentary. The clear thought is still somewhere inside you, but it no longer feels close. This is where many people start chasing another revelation, instead of protecting the clarity they already received. The receiver gap gives you a different question. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" ask, "What condition helps me access what I already know?" That question brings agency back into the room. Imagine waking tomorrow and holding one clear thought long enough to complete one meaningful action. No dramatic sign, no sudden personality change. Just enough steadiness to make the call, finish the page, send the application, organize the plan, or have the conversation you delayed. That may sound small. It is not. Repeated clarity changes the shape of a life because decisions compound. One completed action becomes evidence, and evidence builds trust. And movement makes the next decision easier to see. This is why I keep using the word receiver. There is something important about that word that we will return to later. For now, keep two truths in the same room. Your inner life matters. Your mental condition matters too. Ignoring either one can leave you confused about what kind of support you need. So notice the pattern without judging it. When does your clarity feel strongest? What kind of noise weakens it? Which decisions have you already received enough information to make? Those questions matter because the next breakthrough is about a habit that keeps many sincere people circling the same answer. You can have enough guidance and still ask for more. You can have enough information and still delay movement. You can even mistake repeated confirmation for discernment. And when that happens, the search for clarity quietly becomes a shelter from action. That is where we are going next. The receiver gap explains why access can fluctuate, but it does not explain why some people keep reopening questions that were already answered. The next part will. The next trap is subtle because it can look spiritual. You receive an answer, but instead of acting, you ask for another sign, then another. You tell yourself you are being careful. Sometimes you are, but sometimes caution becomes a hiding place. Chosen one, this does not make you weak. It makes you human. Action creates risk. A new sign feels safer because it gives you the feeling of movement without requiring a decision. You can stay emotionally engaged while remaining physically still. This is what I call the confirmation loop. It begins when discernment has already given you enough, but fear keeps asking truth to repeat itself until action no longer feels necessary. The problem is not prayer. The problem is using prayer to postpone the step that prayer already clarified. There is a difference. Discernment asks for truth. Fear asks truth to keep returning until fear feels comfortable. But fear rarely becomes comfortable before movement. It usually becomes quieter after movement begins. Think about one decision you have revisited too many times. You know the one. You have written about it. You have prayed about it. You have imagined both outcomes. Yet every time clarity appears, you reopen the entire question and start again. That cycle drains trust in yourself. It teaches your mind that no answer is ever enough. Over time, even real clarity starts to feel temporary because you have trained yourself to treat every decision as unfinished. Here is the shift. After a clear insight, give yourself a 24-hour window for one small action, not the entire plan, not a dramatic leap. One action that proves the insight has entered your life. Send the message, write the first page, open the document, make the appointment, remove one distraction. Spend 15 focused minutes on the task you keep calling important. The size of the action matters less than the fact that movement follows clarity. This is the 24-hour clarity rule. Insight without movement becomes memory. Insight with movement becomes direction. You do not need to force certainty. You need to stop abandoning clarity the moment fear returns. If this names your season, mark it with these words: I receive and move. Let that be the line between endless confirmation and grounded action. And now I want you to hold something important. Over the past few years, researchers have continued studying how different regions of the human brain work together, especially what happens when mental processing becomes more coordinated. I am going to return to that later because it connects directly to the word receiver. For now, do not turn it into another distraction. Do not go searching. Just hold the question. What if some of what you have called spiritual distance is actually a clarity problem sitting beside your spiritual life? That possibility does not reduce what is sacred. It simply gives you another place to look. Because not every inner struggle has the same address, and wisdom begins when you stop treating every problem as if it requires the same solution. You already know what the next task is. Watch where you ask for more proof after enough truth has arrived. Notice where your search becomes a shield. Then choose one small movement that tells your nervous system, your mind, and your future that clarity is allowed to become action. The next revelation goes deeper. You are not only trying to stop delaying, you are trying to recover access to a version of yourself that once moved with far less friction. There was a time when curiosity came more easily. You could become absorbed in something without needing to justify it. An idea could become a world. You were not constantly measuring whether every thought was productive. Then life became louder. Responsibilities multiplied. Disappointment taught you to scan for danger. Repetition trained you to conserve attention. Little by little, more of your mental space became occupied by preparation for what might go wrong. This does not mean childhood was perfect. It means many people remember a version of themselves that felt more available to life, more imaginative, more willing to follow a thought before fear interrupted it. Chosen one. What if that version was not childish in the way you assumed? What if part of maturity is not becoming more closed, but learning how to protect openness without losing discernment? The formation season may not have been asking you to invent a new self. It may have been exposing what had accumulated around the original instrument. Fear, hypervigilance, noise, self-doubt. The habit of expecting disappointment before possibility has time to speak. This is the deeper meaning of restoration. You are not trying to become superhuman. You are trying to recover fuller access to capacities that pressure taught you to ration. Attention, creativity, presence, decision. Notice your body for a moment. Let your jaw soften. Drop your shoulders if they are tight. Unclench your hands. Take one slower breath. Then ask yourself one question. How much of my attention has been spent preparing for the next disappointment? Do not force an answer. Let the question land. Some people spend years calling themselves unfocused when much of their attention is actually busy monitoring danger. They are not empty. They are crowded. That is why the next season cannot be built only with motivation. If the instrument is constantly bracing, even a beautiful calling can feel exhausting. You can want the future and still spend most of your mental energy defending yourself from the past. Now, picture something simple. You wake up and your first thought is not dread. You sit with one task and remain there long enough to finish it. You hear the person you love without half of your mind disappearing into another room. You have an idea and keep it long enough to develop it. You make one decision without reopening it. You notice an opportunity without immediately explaining why it probably will not work. That is not a fantasy of perfection. It is a picture of greater access. The future does not require a different soul. It requires fuller access to the person already here. That is why I keep returning to the word receiver. A signal can matter deeply, but the condition of the receiver still affects what can be noticed, organized, and used. This is also why shame is useless here. Shame says you should already be better. Wisdom asks what is taking up the space you need. Those are very different questions. If you are ready to stop guarding every doorway before anything even arrives, write these words. I release the gourd. You are not releasing wisdom. You are releasing the automatic assumption that pain must happen again simply because it happened before. And now we are approaching the question I asked you to hold. Why can a person understand all of this and still wake up tomorrow unable to move? Why can insight be real while access to it feels inconsistent? The answer begins where spiritual language and practical clarity finally meet. You preserved the instrument. The next step is learning what may help it become more available again. Now, I want to close the loop that has been open since earlier. I told you there was something about the word receiver that mattered. I waited because a solution only becomes meaningful after the problem has a shape. Why can you understand all of this and still wake up tomorrow unable to move? Why can insight be true while access to it feels inconsistent? Because clarity is not only about what you receive, it is also about the condition in which your mind organizes what you receive. Here is the plain version. Pain can teach you to narrow. Overload can make clarity inconsistent. Repeated confirmation can delay action. None of those things automatically means your calling disappeared. What do you do with that? You protect the part of you that stayed open. You reduce needless noise. You act on one clear step before fear rebuilds the entire question. And you stop treating every foggy day as evidence that something sacred has left you. Who are you becoming? Not someone who needs endless signs. You are becoming a restored receiver. The clarity you received was real. But clarity that cannot become movement eventually begins to feel like another form of waiting. This is where the research connection becomes useful. Dr. Roger Sperry received the Nobel Prize in 1981 for work involving the specialized functions of the two cerebral hemispheres. His research did not prove any audio product works, but it helped establish how differently the two sides can process information. The team behind the resource I mentioned earlier builds its explanation from that idea. According to its product presentation, its method is designed around what it calls whole brain activation. A woman from California described years of fog and emotional distance. She had tried many practices and still felt disconnected. She reported feeling clearer and more present after using the method. That is her experience, not a promise of yours. A man from Texas described carrying work and family responsibilities while feeling mentally scattered. According to his account, regular use helped him feel more focused and decisive. Again, that is a testimonial, not a guarantee. The product is called the Genius Switch. It is a digital audio track presented by Dr. Daniel Barone and his team. The routine is simple. Headphones, eyes closed, about 8 minutes a day. The product page calls its approach neural sync technology. It says, the sequence is designed to support hemisphere synchronization and whole brain activation. Those are claims from the product team, and they should be understood that way. It is positioned differently from ordinary meditation tracks or generic sound products. You listen for about 8 minutes and return to your day. This is not for everyone. It is for the chosen one who is ready to stop treating mental fog as a character flaw and is willing to explore practical support for clarity. A tool cannot choose your calling, but it may support the condition in which you meet it. According to the current offer on the product page, the listed price is $49. The page presents an additional discount that brings it to $39. It includes 4 digital bonuses and lifetime access. The bonuses include a guided visualization, a grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and a 5 habits infographic. The offer also states that purchases are covered by a money-back guarantee. Read the terms on the official page before deciding. The point is not that buying something makes you obedient. It does not. The point is that clarity has practical value because decisions compound. If a resource helps you create more consistent attention and follow-through, that may be worth examining. Use the official source, linked below, rather than random copies with similar names. The product team says its method is available through its official page, and that is where the description and pinned comment will direct you. If your spirit resonates with what has been described, you can read the details there before making any decision. Consider the fit and decide from clarity rather than impulse. And remember this, the tool does not replace God. It does not replace discernment. It does not surrender for you. It does not take the next step for you. A clearer instrument can support the work. The heart still chooses what the work is for. A tool can support clarity. It cannot tell you who you are. It cannot choose obedience for you. It cannot decide which door is yours. That part still belongs to the heart God has been forming through every season you survived. This matters because I do not want you to confuse support with source. But the deeper current of this message has never been about buying something. It has been about learning how to stop abandoning yourself at the threshold. Chosen one, you have spent enough time gathering signs. You have spent enough time reopening decisions that were already clear. Sometimes hesitation is simply what happens when an old protective pattern meets a new direction. That is why the threshold matters. A threshold is not the same as a prison. A prison says, you cannot leave. A threshold says, the next room is already there, but you still have to move your feet. Think about how many times you have stood near a decision and called the tension a warning. Sometimes it was, but sometimes the tension came because movement threatened an identity built around waiting. If you stop waiting, you lose the excuse that your life has not started yet. That can feel frightening. Waiting can become familiar. Searching can become familiar. Even longing can become familiar. And when a pattern becomes familiar, the nervous system may prefer it over a future that asks you to act differently. So do not demand that every next step feel peaceful before you take it. Peace can guide you, but growth can still feel unfamiliar. Wisdom is not the absence of sensation. Wisdom is the ability to notice what the sensation is actually telling you. This is where your restored receiver becomes practical. You notice the signal. You notice the fear. You separate them. Then you choose one grounded movement instead of reopening the entire question. Maybe that movement is a conversation you have postponed. Maybe it is one page of a plan. Maybe it is closing one tab and finishing what is already in front of you. Maybe it is simply saying no without writing a speech to justify it. The action does not have to impress anyone. It only has to be honest. That is how identity changes. Not through one dramatic declaration, but through repeated moments where your behavior begins to match what you say you know. And if something stirred when I mentioned the practical resource earlier, the official information is still in the description and pinned comment. You can read it there and decide for yourself. No spiritual score is attached to that choice. What matters here is that you stop treating clarity like a visitor and start treating it like something you are responsible for protecting. Protect it with boundaries. Protect it with action. Protect it from the part of you that wants one more sign because one more sign feels safer than one real move. You are not waiting to become worthy. You are not waiting for a perfect mind. You are learning to move as the person who already knows enough to take one faithful step. And the final question is simple. If the restored version of you were already here, what would that person do tomorrow morning before fear had time to rebuild the old story? Hold that question. We are going to answer it with action. Now bring your attention back to yourself, not to the whole future, not to every unanswered question, just to this moment. If it is safe, let your eyes close or lower your gaze. Let your shoulders drop. Take one slower breath. Picture a door in front of you. It does not open into some distant life where every problem is solved. It opens into tomorrow morning. It is simply the next ordinary day, but you are meeting it differently. See yourself waking up. The old story is still nearby. Doubt may still speak, but this time you do not ask those voices for permission before you begin. Now ask one question. What becomes possible when I stop abandoning clarity the moment fear returns? Do not search for a dramatic answer. Let one specific thing rise. Maybe it is the message you need to send. Maybe it is the page you need to finish. Maybe it is the application you keep delaying. Maybe it is the boundary you already know you need. Choose one. Keep it small enough to complete. The goal is to teach your mind that clarity can survive contact with action. Now imagine yourself doing that one thing tomorrow. See your hand reaching for the phone, the notebook, the keyboard, or the door. See yourself beginning before the old debate has time to rebuild itself. Notice what happens in your body. There may be tension, there may be relief. You only need to stop letting the feeling make the decision. Put one hand on your chest if that feels natural. Take another slow breath. Then say silently, "I can feel fear," and still move with clarity. Now make the action more concrete. Give it a time. Give it a place. Make it smaller than your excuses. Next, identify one distraction that could steal that moment. Maybe it is checking messages before you begin. Maybe it is opening 5 new tabs instead of finishing one task. Remove that obstacle before tomorrow arrives. Prepare the document. Write the first sentence tonight. Make the right action easier to enter. This is what restoration looks like when it becomes practical, not another promise. One clear decision protected long enough to become behavior. The rare refusal kept your heart from hardening. The receiver gap taught you why access can change. The confirmation loop showed you where searching can become avoidance. Now movement completes the lesson. You do not need to know every step. You need the next one. Let tomorrow become evidence that you can trust clarity without demanding that fear disappear first. Hold the image of that door for one more moment. The door is not waiting for a different version of you. It is waiting for the version who is already here to stop walking away from what they know. When you are ready, open your eyes or lift your gaze. Keep one action with you. Do not add 5 more. 1 is enough. Because the final part of this message is not about getting more information. It is about sealing the identity that can carry what you already received. Chosen one, we are at the place where every open loop closes. You came here asking what you did that was so rare. The answer was that pressure had every opportunity to close you, and something sacred in you remained open. You were hurt, but hurt did not get final authorship. You were tired, but exhaustion did not become your identity. That is the rare refusal. You refused to let pain finish the story. Then you saw the receiver gap. You saw the confirmation loop too. Sometimes one more sign is not wisdom. Sometimes it is fear asking truth to repeat itself so action can be postponed. Now let the old burdens go. Release the bitterness you kept because it made you feel protected. Release the shame around foggy days. Release the belief that waiting is who you are. You are allowed to move without becoming reckless. You are allowed to trust what is clear without demanding that every doubt disappear first. Take one breath. Feel the weight of the person you have been carrying. Thank that version of you for surviving. But do not ask them to lead the next season with the same defenses that were needed in the last one. Now let these words become yours. I am still here. I am not my hard season. I do not need pain to name me. I can receive clearly. I can move with what I know. I will not abandon myself at the threshold. You do not need to shout them. Let them land. The power is in whether tomorrow gives those words a body. Remember the action you chose. Protect it. Complete it. Let that movement become evidence. And if this message named something real in you, write these words below. I am still open. Let that be your final marker. Not open to everything, open to truth, open to the next faithful step. When I said heaven paused, I was never asking you to imagine God becoming surprised. I was giving language to the weight of a choice that often happens in complete silence. You had reasons to close. You had reasons to harden. You had reasons to become a smaller version of yourself because smaller felt safer. And still, something in you returned. That is what matters. You need to protect what survived, restore what has become crowded, and move with what is already clear. May your heart remain discerning. May your next step be grounded. May you remember that the door in front of you does not require perfection. The season does not change because you say the right words. It begins to change when your choices stop serving the person pain tried to create. So leave this message with one decision, one action, and one truth. Pain touched you. It did not name you. Amen.